All right, welcome back to the Here's the Deal channel. I am live streaming right now on OBS. Not sure if it's working. Let me just double check. I haven't streamed on OBS in quite a while. Let me just check the welcome back to the yeah, it's working. All right, guys, thanks for joining. This is pretty important because it seems to me that hey, what's up, Brandon Mitchell? Thanks for being here, guys. If you would share the stream, because this is very important. It seems like the recent propaganda campaign against Americans who are trying to break away from tyranny and law enforcement oppression has been effective to the point where people are actually applauding ICE and FBI and the alphabet soup agencies and local law enforcement. And it's crazy to me because people are, again, cheering for their own chains and their own oppression and their own slavery. And I get it. Nobody wants a riot in their town. Nobody wants their cities to be burned to the ground. Nobody wants hoodlums running around. I didn't mean to rhyme all that. But I want to show you what this Florida sheriff says with regard to what he's going to do if somebody decides to rise up against and resist ICE or the military parade, the fascist military parade. And I'm saying Trump's a fascist just like I would say Obama was a fascist. And so is Biden. He was a fascist. Every administration is a fascist administration because they bow down to and serve the corporate elites. It's a merger between the government and corporations. Corporations are created by governments, and then they start dishing handouts to special interest groups and to lobbyists, and none of it works for our benefit. All these laws that are made, they serve two purposes. They take away your rights and they take away your wealth, and those rights and that wealth is transferred. It is the making of a law is a power and wealth transfer because it takes money to sustain the enforcement of that law. And you're the one who will be shaken down for that. So I want to show you what's going on here. And we're going to check out some reactions to people who many would call bootlickers about the comments that this Florida sheriff is about to make. Check this out.
Peaceful protests are part of our democracy. We invite people to share their opinions. That's what our country is all about. The key word in that is peaceful. And if it's peaceful, us in law enforcement are going to make sure you have a safe environment to do it in.
Let me just remind you, and I did a video on this. There was a woman from Australia who was part of a pretty big news agency who was peacefully, not even protesting, she was peacefully reporting, and a thin blue line cop took careful aim at her leg and shot her with a rubber bullet. If you doubt me on that, just check it. Just say Australian journalist shot at protest. It'll come up. They did an interview with her. She was hurt by it. And it was intentional. So these people, you got to understand, these people are not just there to stop riots. They are there to stop you if they don't like what you say or they don't like what you do. They at the drop of a hat will be the first to pull you over and they will harass you. Since when is it okay to start trusting law enforcement who's been acting as our enemy for years? And I'm talking about the same law enforcement that economically terrorizes us every day, the ones who enforce civil asset forfeiture, the ones who cry about it if civil asset forfeiture is on the table to be diminished. And I'll show you that as an example of that in a second, because every single sheriff in this land signed on to a bill. It was H.R. 1525 that begged Dan Red Flag Law Gun Confiscation Crenshaw to please keep civil asset forfeiture as a tool in our tool chest. Let's keep listening.
Part of that process. If you let it turn violent, you do not want to do that in Brevard County. I'm going to tell you that, and I believe I can speak for my fellow sheriffs around the rest of the state. You don't want to let it happen. And just so there's no confusion, because I don't want to hear any whining later saying we didn't know, I'm going to break it down for you, all right? Because as you watch these riots unfold across the rest of the country, what you are seeing is buildings being burned down, police cars being bricked, having explosive devices thrown on them, having fire, guns pointed at them, bricks thrown at them, all and on.
Oh, no, we don't want guns pointed at police because it's only right for police to point guns at the people. And this is not me saying, here's what you should do. But historically speaking, if you look at the Declaration of Independence, you look at what sparked the revolution, and you look at what the colonists did to the oppressors of that time. It wasn't the thin blue line gang. That was the thin red line gang of British tyranny. And you look at what they said in the Declaration of Independence and why they broke away and why they separated and formed their own government. It's because of the very things that the redcoats were doing to the colonists, which is the exact same thing the blue coats, the thin blue line gang, is doing to us every single day under things like corporate traffic law, under the drug war, which isn't a war on drugs, it's a war on people, under the filling the prison industrial complex, which creates a whole new slave class.
So I'm gonna break it down for you, all right? And if somebody wants to know what I mean by turn violent, all right, this is what I mean. If you resist lawful orders, you're going to jail. Let me be.
There you go. So what's a lawful order? Are you going to give us Bill of Rights orders, constitutional orders, or just arbitrary edicts of move back or I'm going to charge you with obstruction?
Very clear about that. If you block an intersection or a roadway in Brevard County, you are going to jail. If you flee arrest, you're going to go to jail tired because we are going to run you down and put you in jail. If you try to mob rule a car in Brevard County, gathering around it, refusing to let the driver leave, in our county, you're most likely going to get run over and dragged across the street. If you spit on us, you're going to the hospital and in jail. If you hit one of us, you're going to the hospital and jail and most likely get bitten by one of our big.
But what happens if they hit you? What if they point guns at you? What if they break your door down? What if they go to the wrong address and threaten your family? Nothing happens to them. Did you know that qualified immunity, in different words, is actually spoken of in the Declaration of Independence? We'll go over that in a second, and we're going to go over some of this letter signed by 3,086 sheriffs in the United States. There's only 3,144 counties. And not all counties have sheriffs. This is virtually every sheriff's department that represents every single deputy in the United States, begging Dan Crenshaw to keep civil asset forfeiture, which is legalized armed robbery, on the table as a tool chest in their toolbox.
Beautiful
or a tool in their toolbox.
Dogs that we have here.
Let's go back over this. Listen to this.
If you spit on us, you're going to the hospital and in jail. If you hit one of us.
I'm not for open borders or closed borders. I am for market borders. If you're for closed borders, you're literally saying, I trust the United States government that has never shown itself to be trustworthy to secure our borders. And I also trust them to extort us so that they can fund that. And I trust that those funds will never be misused or abused. So I trust those when you say you're for open borders, you're literally saying, I trust a government that is proven historically not to be trusted. I'm for market borders.
You're going to the hospital and jail and most likely get bitten by one of our big, beautiful dogs that we have here. If you throw a brick, a firebomb, or point a gun at one of our deputies, we will be notifying your family where to collect your remains at.
But if they throw a brick or a firebomb or a flashbang or kick down your door or point a gun at Daniel Shaver in the hallway of La Quinta Inn in Mesa, Arizona, and pull the trigger 5 times, thereby ending his life, nothing will happen to you. Or you'll get a really, really light penalty and a light sentence like they did to Amber Geiger in Dallas when she killed Botham Jean in his own living room, on his own couch, watching TV. I am against riots that are burning down cities and blocking highways and threatening lives. Yes, that's true. But are we going to have the redcoats come and protect us? Or do we take this upon ourselves and go, you know what? Like they did in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. You remember that video? I don't know if it's still up on YouTube, but in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, they heard that BLM and Antifa were coming in, and they had already destroyed Portland. They had already destroyed Seattle. They had already run amok in Washington State, and they were coming to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and all the townspeople got together, most of whom were armed, and they had their rifles slung over their shoulders. BLM did come, but not in the droves that you thought they would. And they were very, very peaceful and watched their P's and Q's as they walked down the road. And it didn't have anything to do with law enforcement. The townspeople showed up and they protected their town. The problem is we live in the year 2025 and we've been dealt decades upon decades of a blow of propaganda, and nobody thinks that we can do this kind of thing ourselves. But we can. It just takes self-determination and coordination and knowing who the people in your community are. Backcountry Bandits, thank you for that super chat.
Because we will kill you graveyard dead. We're not going to play. This has got to stop. You're watching what's taking place out there. You're seeing police officers that are being attacked, being spit on, being put in harm's way just for doing their jobs. You're seeing ICE agents that are being targeted for doing their jobs. And you're seeing...
They're just doing their jobs. They're just ICE agents just doing their jobs. Again, I'm not giving a directive for anybody to do anything, but let us recall what happened in the Revolutionary War. The British, the Redcoats, were just doing their jobs, and they were doing such a swell job. Let me just show you. Here's how swell of a job they were doing. Says... In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions, have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince, talking about King George, whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant, is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. And right down here it says, talking about the king, he has... Where is it? He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has erected a multitude of new offices, corporal, sergeant, officer, and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people. They were just doing their jobs, harassing the people. They were just doing their jobs, eating out their substance. What does that sound like? Economic terrorism. When you have a corporate traffic law, for example, just one example, let alone civil asset forfeiture, all the gun laws, the drug war laws, you have officers using as a justification all these new laws and all these new offices that have been erected against us in the name of protecting and serving the people, eating out our substance. Check this right. Look at this. For quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them, what does this sound like? By a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states. Protecting them by a mock trial? What else does that sound like? That sounds like qualified immunity. So you got this guy right here crying about, hey, don't you dare treat our police officers like this, because if you do, this is what's going to happen, when the same thing could be said in reverse. If you treat our community like this, officers, redcoats, thin blue line tyrants, this is what's going to happen. What if somebody rose up and said that?
Obstructionists that are doing all of this, standing in the way of law and order. Not here, not in the state of Florida. So to make it real simple, if you don't want to have any of those things happen to you, obey the law. Go protest all you want. Do it peacefully. Stand on the mountaintops and yell your opinion, your views. We invite that. But don't you dare break the law, because it won't go well for you. All right, General? Thank you, sir.
Don't you dare break a law. It won't go well for you. Just like they want civil asset forfeiture, for example. They want the respect of the people, and they want people to view them as the protectors and servants of the community. And yet they turn around and do something like this when they beg Dan Red Flag Law Crenshaw. Let me get a different pen right here. They beg him to please preserve a critical tool in the fight to fight the drug cartels. Vote against H.R. 1525. H.R. 1525 was going to take away major power from the sheriff's department with regard to civil asset forfeiture, despite the fact that they are killing hundreds of Americans daily. Oh, this is, I'm highlighting this. Let's see. H.R. 1525, the FAIR Act, would largely, let me get red here, would largely dismantle a critical tool in the fight against the Mexican drug cartels. Civil asset forfeiture, for example, 1525 would repeal equitable sharing. That is, when they get your wallet in that drug bust and they confiscate your vehicle, they steal your vehicle and they impound it because there was some marijuana in there. They take that car and they put it up for auction, and then they get that money. And then there's this thing called equitable sharing, where the state agencies share the bounty, the booty, with the federal agencies. I don't remember what the split is, 70-30, 60-40, whatever it was, which is the cornerstone of state and local participation in joint operations with federal law enforcement, especially on task forces such as HIDTA, on behalf of the nation's 3,086 sheriffs. The National Sheriff's Association therefore asks you to vote against H.R. 1525. Let us keep legalized armed robbery, is what sheriffs like this have signed on to. And this was made by Sheriff Jim Skinner from the National Sheriff's Association. And it's signed by him right here. Sheriff Jim Skinner from Collin County, Texas. You thought Texas was free? Think again. Now let's take a look at some reactions of Thin Blue Line. Some would call bootlickers. Gee, I don't know why. I don't know why they would get that moniker. And look at the reaction that they have to the video that we just saw. This is the Hodge twins.
So with that, I will turn it over to Sheriff Ivey.
Thanks, John.
Sheriff Ivey.
Good morning, everybody. So I want to start out by thanking our Attorney General for joining us here in beautiful Brevard County. Our Attorney General and Governor Ron DeSantis also for their amazing support for law enforcement. Public safety in our communities is like nothing we've ever seen before. People are moving to Florida in droves because this is the free state of Florida. They're moving here because they know their families will be safe here, their businesses.
Somebody in the chat said, American Rebels said they are patriots. Is it patriotic to vote for the father of the VAXX? Is it patriotic to vote for the best friend for 10 or 15 years of Jeffrey Epstein? Is it patriotic to vote for the guy who in his first term oversaw and signed the largest power and wealth transfer in world history, not just American history, $6.2 trillion in the CARE Act with a $4 trillion Federal Reserve backstop? Is it patriotic to increase the national debt and devalue the currency, which is the product of the time and laboring energies of every single American on American soil? That's not patriotic. It's tyrannical. It's not patriotic. So you can't be patriotic and vote for a guy like that. The Hodge twins pulled out all the stops, got their audience to vote for Donald Trump. They voted for Donald Trump, the father of the VAXX. It's crazy. It's a crazy world we live in.
Will be safe. They won't have to contend with what we're seeing in places like Los Angeles and New York and Chicago, those things that are happening right now as we stand here today speaking. Our general was, I will say, very instrumental, was the tip of the spear in our blueprint for Free Florida. And now he's the tip of the spear in making sure that we are protecting what I like to call our 3 C's, our citizens, our cops, and our Constitution. And he has stood strong with not only law enforcement, but
our citizens, the 3 C's. I have not heard that. Our citizens, our cops, and our Constitution. Even though one group there, first of all, you are not a citizen. You're not a denizen. You're not a subject. You're not subject to the jurisdiction thereof. You're a man or a woman of the land. You're just a human being. You're not a citizen. You're not a subject. And as far as cops, aren't cops decidedly against the Constitution? I mean, let's just take the Second Amendment. Name one cop that would not throw you in jail if you had in your vehicle a fully automatic firearm, which was declared illegal in the 1930s under the National Firearms Act. Name one cop who would let you be free to keep and bear arms, whatever arm you wanted to, in concert with the Second Amendment. Name one cop that wouldn't penalize you if you truly tried to keep and bear whatever arm you wanted to. You can't name one. That's why a lot of people say, gee, I don't know why they would say this. There are no good cops. If you think there are, give me your best argument.
With us here in Brevard County, and we appreciate you. I'm gonna start out by addressing the doxing issue that we were talking about. Our ICE agents, just like our Florida Highway Patrol, are our partners. We all ride together in this. We all are out here to make sure that we're protecting our citizens, protecting our communities. Many of them have been called to the.
That's a noble concept. Local law enforcement and ICE working together as brothers. Man, we got a damn good show for y'all today. Before we get to today's video, don't forget, got a new giveaway.
Deal with the amount of fugitive.
That's a horrible idea for local and state police to be working with federal agencies. That's a horrible, horrible idea, because you've seen what happens when there's a tragedy in the area. The local and state police step down and walk under the authority of the FBI or the ATF. Backcountry Bandits, welcome as a member. I appreciate it. If you feel like this content is worthy, follow me, hit the bell notification icon, give this video a like, and become a channel member. Appreciate it. Backcountry Bandits.
And things that are going on, detainers. So for us, we will have their back. We will work closely with Colonel Howes and his team in making sure that we're increasing patrol. We're watching them. Anybody that's doxing them, as the general said, we passed a law about 4.
You're doxed every day by local, state, and federal law enforcement. They got your license plate, they got your registration, they know proof of insurance. All your information is hooked up to a federal, state, or local database. You're constantly being doxed every day. If you're driving down the street and they decide to run your license plate, they just doxed you. They found out who you are. They found out all your information, where you live. And these law enforcement agents are concerned about federal agents being doxed by people who are fed up with the tyranny.
4 or 5 years ago that makes it illegal to dox here in the state of Florida. So
yeah, like in these blue states, they passed in sanctuary city laws, like Chicago, and then cops are getting doxed. They're doing nothing to protect the cops. They're doing everything to protect the illegal immigrant, but nothing for the citizens, nothing for the cops. That's why they walk on with the...
Nothing for the cops. That's why cops can walk around like, I don't know what he's about to say, but they walk around like the Scorpion unit, the jump out crew in Memphis, and what they did to Tyree Nichols on camera. And they will, I mean, they're in jail right now, but they're just going to get a slap on the wrist compared to if you did the same thing that jump out crew did to Tyree Nichols. If you did that, you wouldn't see daylight ever for the rest of your life. These people lay in cover for cops. How much convincing do you think the founding fathers, we're talking about the Patrick Henrys, the Samuel Adams, the Benjamin Franklins, the George Washingtons, how much convincing do you think you would have to do to them to try to instill in their minds that the redcoats are bad, even when the redcoats say they're good? And they're so sad that, or they're so infuriated that somebody dared to dox their fellow redcoats. John Doe said, you asked for some channels that we think would be good to collab with. We recommend Hannah Wallen and Honey Badger Arcade. I believe they're covering an important issue. All right, man. Thank you. I appreciate it, John Doe.
Faces, even supplying with money, aid. Yeah. Just funded by our tax dollars.
So anybody that's doing that, we will take them to full task on doing it, and we will stand with you. I want to define a couple things. Our general was very kind in how he said things. I'm not as usually as elegant in how I say things. So I'm gonna first say that peaceful protests are part of our democracy. We invite people to share their opinions. That's what our
all right. This is the reaction I wanted to see from the Hodge twins. Have not seen this yet.
Country is all about. The key word in that is peaceful. And if it's peaceful, us in law enforcement are going to make sure you have a safe environment to do it in. That's part of that process. If you let it turn violent, you do not want to do that in Brevard County. I'm going to tell you that, and I believe I can speak for my fellow sheriffs around the rest of the state. You don't want to let it happen.
If you try to kidnap a member of my community, you thin blue line thugs, who you do not want to do that. You know, that's one of the reasons that politicians and the law enforcement class don't want you armed, is because they want to make sure that their gravy train is safe. It's kind of like disarming somebody in a gun-free zone. Well, you know what you've just done? You've created a safer working environment for people who want to do people harm, because they're going to bring guns into that zone. And if you, as a free man, decide to bring a gun to that zone, as a good man, who the reason you're bringing it in there is so you can protect yourself, you can protect your family, you can protect anybody who might be in your zone of influence, you have a completely different mindset than a criminal. A criminal is going to walk into a gun-free zone with a gun because he doesn't care about the people's laws. He doesn't care about the laws of Congress. He doesn't care about the laws of your state. He's going to come in there and he's going to do whatever damage he can. And that gun-free zone pretty much has guaranteed that he is going to have a safe working environment. That's the same thing. That's what gun laws do for the criminals out in the street who are wearing those uniforms. They now have a safe working environment where they can exact their tyranny under corporate traffic law to keep the people safe on the roadway. And they're going to get little pushback because, hey, if you disarm people, they become weaker. They become disempowered.
And just so there's no confusion, because I don't want to hear any whining later saying we didn't know, I'm going to break it down for you, all right? Because as you watch these riots unfold across the rest of the country, what you are seeing is buildings being burned down, police cars being bricked, having explosive devices.
Wait a minute. Didn't the government burn a building down in recent history? Gosh, what building was that the government burned down? What state was that in? Oh, that's right. It was in Texas, in Waco, Texas, in the 90s, I believe. And the building they burned down had 76 innocent people who literally harmed no one. 20 of those 76 were children. It was one of the biggest mass casualty events on American soil in recent history, and it was brought to us courtesy of the FBI and the ATF. So this guy's talking about burning buildings down. Well, you guys specialize in that. How many buildings have you burned down? How many doors have you broken down? How many civil asset forfeiture acts have you done in airports, on the street corner?
Is thrown on them, having fire, guns pointed at them, bricks thrown at them, all and on. So I'm gonna break it down for you. All right.
Break it down.
And if somebody wants to know what I mean by turn violent, all right, this is what I mean. If you resist lawful orders, you're going to jail. Let me be very.
Yeah, exactly. Randy says, I don't remember them being this proactive during Uvalde. That is a great point. Do you know how many guys, put the number in the room if you remember how many officers from how many different agencies arrived at Uvalde and for 90 minutes did nothing while they knew an active shooter was in the classroom picking off kids? Anybody got the exact number? How many blue line gang members showed up? How many protectors and servants of the people were there to protect those kids? How many? I'll just wait. Yeah, they were absolute cowards. These people are going to wax all virtuous about, hey, we're going to come out against you if you start burning our cities down. Well, how come you didn't save the kids? 376, exactly. 376 from 5 different agencies. It wasn't just the local police department. It was different agencies. 1 or 2 of those were federal agencies, and they stood down while the shots were being fired. If there was ever a time to show us how much you care about the public, how much you care about kids, you would have done it. You would have showed us right there, but you didn't. Chevy just dropped a $10 super chat. Thank you, Chevy. I appreciate it.
Clear about that. If you block an intersection or a roadway in Brevard County, you are going to jail. If you flee arrest, you're going to go to jail tired, because we are going to run you down and put you in jail. If you try to mob rule a car in Brevard County, gathering around it, refusing to let the driver leave, in our county, you're most likely going to get run over and dragged across the street. If you spit on us, you're going to the hospital and in jail. If you hit one of us, you're going to the hospital and jail. and most likely get bitten by one of our big, beautiful dogs that we have here.
Yeah, the dogs that only the thin blue line can make our worst enemy when typically they're our best friend. So that's the government stepping in, turning everything upside down. Gray Man says, everyone called the sheriff's department. I can confirm they're getting a lot of calls. Thank you for that super chat, Gray Man.
If you throw a brick,
I'm unable to put the super chats up on the screen because I'm not using StreamYard today. I'm using OBS. So if there's a way that you guys know how I can put it up on the screen, let's see. Yeah, I can't. Let's see. It's not. Tag says, thanks. Here's the deal. Thank you, Tag.
a firebomb, or point a gun at one of our deputies, we will be notifying your family where to collect your remains at, because we will kill you graveyard dead. We're not going to play. This has got to stop.
Man, this is awesome.
You're watching.
Yeah, this is so awesome to hear the redcoats threaten the colonists if something ever went down and went bad when they're doing bad things to us every day. As a matter of fact, MS-13 can't do the bad things to you that your local police department can. You know why? Because MS-13 doesn't have in the minds of all the people in your community this idea that they are somehow in control and over us and they're the authority. They can do it. We're not going to resist. MS-13 breaks into your house. You're not going to have any problem resisting and shooting at them. But if a SWAT team does, people put their guns down because they realize they can't win that battle. MS-13 is not going to have helicopters in the air. They're not going to have dogs on the ground for you. They're not going to have unbridled, qualified immunity to chase you down. MS-13 doesn't have that. Your local law enforcement, the state law enforcement, the feds do. They've got that kind of power. There's no other power on the planet that can rival the power of a local state or federal police department, because that's primarily due to the superstitious idea that there's something legitimate called statism, and there are people who have authority that none of the rest of us have. So we need to submit to that authority, or we will be, in their minds, rightly punished.
It's taking place out there. You're seeing police officers that are being attacked, being spit on, being put in harm's way just for doing their jobs. You're seeing ICE agents that are being targeted.
Oh, did Brandon Tatum go over this one too? We'll I'll try to pull up a window on that here in a second. If you guys are interested in me covering that, Brandon, I call him Brandon Soften Him Up Tatum. He's an ex-police officer from, I think, Phoenix. It's somewhere in Arizona. He's an ex-police officer from, and I think he was part of a SWAT unit, but I call him Brandon Soften Him Up Tatum because he is totally for an older man getting on and straddling and pummeling a young kid who's just out on the street buying tobacco products. And the man who's beating him up happens to have a uniform on, but Brandon is all for that. Hey, at least you didn't punch the kid in the face. He was just softening him up. Punching him in the chest, you can put somebody into a cardiac arrhythmia punching somebody in the chest, especially if you're a big man with a big fist on a small bony kid chest. I'll tell you what, if you saw your neighbor pummeling his own kid in his front yard, you would have a problem with that. Why don't people have a problem with a uniformed police officer straddling on the body of a young kid, just punching him in the chest? Why don't people have a problem with that? It's because of that cognitive dissonance we've got. It's because that propaganda and that bias working in our brain saying, well, he's an authority, he's allowed to do that.
Jobs. And you're seeing obstructionists that are doing all of this, standing in the way of law and order. Not here, not in the state of Florida. So to make it real simple, if you don't want to have any of those things happen to you, obey the law. Go protest all you want. Do it peacefully. Stand on the mountaintops and yell your opinion, your views. We invite that. But don't you dare break the law, because it won't go well for you. All right, General? Thank you, sir.
Graveyard dead.
Yeah, I think, our great...
Holy crud, man. What am I seeing here? $50 super chat from Backcountry Bandits. Cops aren't people, they're agents of the corporation. When in history did the servant strike the master and receive a promotion? Thank you, Brian, for the relentless pursuit of truth. Holy cow. Thank you for that crazy super chat. Yeah, well, I know they don't act as people, but they are people acting as agents of the corporation. I mean, I agree with the sentiment, but these are people just like you and me who've been just like the Nazi SS. They're people like you and me who have been brainwashed to such an extent where their loyalty is undying to their masters, and they will do anything to please their masters, up to and including hurting their own people on order. And then they absolve themselves by saying, hey, I was just following orders. You don't get to escape personal responsibility, not from the universal perspective, from the universe looking at you. You don't get to escape personal morality, and you don't get to escape the moniker of criminal by saying, I was just following orders. I was just doing my job. Hey, I didn't write the rules. I just enforced them. That's what they tried in Nuremberg, and they were sent to the gallows, basically. So thank you, Backcountry. That's crazy that you just did that. Sent that super chat. Eli says, USA government is using our rights against us. They infiltrate peaceful protests. Yes, there is COINTELPRO going on. There is infiltration. There are bad actors who belong to the alphabet soup agencies or to the state police that will infiltrate a crowd. Excuse me. And co-opt it. Excuse me.
Governor, I think, said it well yesterday. If you're a family out there, you're driving, and all of a sudden you get surrounded by one of these angry demonstrations that's turned violent, you don't need to sit there and wait while people smash your window and damage your vehicle and put your family in jeopardy. You drive. Just drive. Get yourself out of harm's way. Mm-hmm. If somebody's in front of you and they're threatening your vehicle, you just drive. But we're grateful to have a great president and a governor.
I don't disagree with that. I'm trying to get my voice back, guys. Sorry about that. I hate when I choke on air like that. But yeah, they will. Eli's right. They will co-opt a crowd. And because the crowd is so easy to manipulate anyway, all you need is one little spark. And before you know it, that peaceful crowd turns riotous. All you have to have is one or two or three bad actors breaking windows, and then everybody else, like lemmings, just follow suit.
Governor that respect rule of law, and in Florida, you're not going to see anything like you're seeing in California.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I was choked up from that last super chat by Backcountry, man. I was like, what the heck?
If every state ran their state the way Florida's running their state, mm-hmm. this wouldn't be happening in L.A.
Yeah,
Chicago.
We just saw.
I don't know if you live in Florida. Let me know. But some of the worst law enforcement that I've seen is coming out of Florida and Texas, two bright red states that are enacting crazy amounts of tyranny. Did you see what they're doing in Texas right now? They've made THC, selling THC, buying THC products, and possessing THC. They've made it illegal. It's been legal since, I think they legalized it in 2017, 2018. They've made it illegal. In other words, they've criminalized everybody who has THC. We're talking about thousands upon thousands of businesses that have built their families, their lives around selling medically useful THC products that help people from PTSDs, from committing, helping with seizures in small children. There's so many benefits to THC products, and the governor there, I don't know if he signed it yet. Hopefully Abbott doesn't sign it, but the lieutenant governor, Dan Patrick, is all about enforcing these new THC laws called SB, was it SB 6 or SB 3?
These protesters block traffic, and the people in the cars just sitting there. Why don't y'all inch forward, move at a safe speed?
Yeah.
If your life is not in danger, you're allowed to proceed. Just proceed with caution. Go very slow. If someone jumps in front of your car, continue to proceed.
If somebody jumps in front of your car on a roadway, I ain't down with. I don't know any rational, normal person who thinks that it's okay to block traffic where somebody might be late for work and lose their job. There might be an ambulance trying to get through. There might be a husband trying to rush his wife to the hospital because she's pregnant. There might be a kid bleeding in the back seat. Anybody who is willing to block off traffic is basically saying, just run me over. Go ahead, run me over. I'm telling you, if I had any one of my family members who had to get to the hospital or I had to get somewhere, traffic won't be blocked in front of me. And I know a lot of people who think about that or think like that. If you think it's okay to block traffic for a protest, put a 1 in the room. If you think it's not, I'm going to go ahead and put my 2 in the room just to get a jump start. But ain't no way that's okay. You're actually committing a crime against everybody else in your community who wants to get somewhere. If you block travel, you are basically being a mini tyrant. Who are you to block traffic? Who are you to take away somebody's right to travel down the road? You don't have a right to do that. That's a crime.
Stop, warn them, keep it, nudge forward 3, 4, 5 miles an hour. If people start banging on your windows, breaking your window, vroom. Well, you could do that, Floyd. Protest we saw, that was in Washington, D.C. Yeah. But if the light is green and they're impeding traffic and they've taken away my rights to travel freely, I'm going to inch forward. I'm going to do it in a safe manner. I'm going to try to avoid hurting somebody. Yeah. If they don't want to move, that's on them.
Yeah, but it's the same thing with the gun laws. Let's say somebody's breaking your windows and you're on the street and you live in a state where it's against the law to run anybody over, no matter what they're doing. I'm not aware of any laws, but I'm sure they're probably out there in deep blue Democrat states or something like that. But it's the same thing with gun laws. If they're going to make that law, hey, you can't run over protesters, even if they're bashing your window, you just got to sit there. That's crazy to me that there would be a law like that. But that is tantamount to, hey, you can't have this gun to defend yourself. Hey, you can't defend yourself by using that vehicle to drive away and using it as a defensive weapon, a defensive tool.
Yeah, but hey, that makes a lot of sense. But do it up in Washington, D.C. and let one of those protesters get hurt. Yeah.
Yep, that's true. That's true. There's a lot of different things. Now, here's a lady, I've never heard of her till today, called Undivided with Brandy Cruz. Says, Florida sheriff warns rioters, we will kill you, graveyard dead. And I think first she plays a clip of a Democrat type sheriff or police chief talking his nonsense.
Of course, the new Seattle police chief, when talking about how he's going to manage protests and riots, also went full-blown TDS this week.
I will do everything.
Full-blown TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. I am as concerned about people with TDS, by the way, Trump derangement syndrome, in my opinion, should be relegated to people who irrationally and hypocritically and inconsistently judge Donald Trump. Just like if you have Biden derangement syndrome or Obama derangement syndrome, if you don't have a rational argument and basis for your criticism against the tyrant you're criticizing, then you probably then you're deranged in some way. If you don't know why you're against somebody, why are you even voicing that you're against them? But I'm just as concerned about TDS as I am TWS, which is Trump worship syndrome, because people check out, they drink the Kool-Aid, they check into the cult of personality, and then they promote or parrot whatever their favorite king has to say.
Thing in my power, I want to be clear, to protect anyone in Seattle from anyone who comes to this city with the intention to hurt them or inhibit their First Amendment rights. And what that means is...
That's not a bad thing. I mean, isn't that, if there was a job for cops, wouldn't that be it? Wouldn't the job for cops be, hey, I'm going to protect these people's rights to peacefully protest? That sounds logical and reasonable to me.
At some point, I will probably go to jail and be in prison.
I can't even listen
because
to
we
this
have
man.
an administration that has threatened to jail politicians.
Yeah, so he's, I'm going to protect our community from Donald Trump.
Is that what he said? Hold on. What am I? Sometimes I feel like I'm listening to a different clip. Let me see.
To manage protests and riots, also went full-blown TDS this week.
I will do everything in my power, I want to be clear, to protect anyone in Seattle from anyone who comes to this city with the intention to hurt them or inhibit their First Amendment rights.
I don't see a problem there, but this guy's a freaking hypocrite, because I bet you anything he doesn't protect every member of the community in order to protect their Second Amendment rights. Bet he doesn't do it. And I bet he has led SWAT raids that break down people's homes at 2:00 in the morning and violate every member of the household in order to facilitate the drug war. I bet he has done that. So he's a freaking hypocrite. I'll protect you, and I'm saying I'm going to protect you in this, even though I have a history of not protecting you in these other things. But so far, he hasn't actually said anything wrong.
And what that means is, at some point, I will probably go to jail and be in prison.
Can't even listen
because
to
we
this
have
guy.
an administration that has threatened to jail politicians.
Yeah, so he's, I'm going to protect our...
Oh, okay, so he said the last thing about the administration. Yeah, well, the administration is rogue, just like the last administration and the administration before that and the administration before that, because they're totally pro-IRS, totally pro-income tax, 100% on board with the Federal Reserve. How do I know? Because they had the power to do something about it, and they didn't. Or do they not have the power? Now, they tell us they have the power. They tell us that Donald Trump or Joe Biden or Barack Obama or George Bush or George H.W. Bush were the leaders of the free world. Well, if they had that much power, how come they didn't do anything about the domestic terror cell known as the IRS? Maybe they didn't do anything about the domestic terror cell because A, they don't have the power and it's the IRS and the people who own the IRS that have the power, or B, they didn't do anything about it because they don't want to, because they work for the IRS who has power over them. Which one is it? Maybe it's a mixture of both. Maybe they don't have the power because the Federal Reserve and people who own the issuance and value of our currency have the power, which means they own the IRS and the IRS is basically over them. And the reason they're not abolishing the income tax is because the banking masters won't allow them to do that. But these people won't talk about that. These people want you to pick a side. These people want you to vote for the chains of their own oppression. That's the problem with these people.
Immunity from Donald Trump. And I'll probably go to jail for doing it, as if Donald Trump even knows who you are. But it's just this.
It's not about Donald Trump knowing who he is. He can set the policy and send ICE agents, or, the underlings go, hey, you know what? This guy right here, he's a frickin' libtard. We need to go get him. We need to go exact some tyranny against somebody. We don't care whose head falls. Joseph G just sent 5 Here's the Deal gift memberships to people. If you pick those up, thank you, Joseph. Thank Joseph Doe. Appreciate that, Joe.
Weakness that, again, as I've said, it encourages and excuses the behavior of rioters, because they look at that and they see the police chief is on our side against
By the
Trump.
way, I'm 100%, in case I didn't make it clear, I am 100% against rioters, because they are doing things that are not in accordance with individual liberties. They are burning cities. They are damaging businesses. They're breaking windows. They're flipping cars. They're threatening people. They're getting in people's way. They're halting the free market. Not for that at all. Totally 100% against it. But I'm also against the thin blue line members that do that every single day. A cop will not think twice about blocking traffic for no reason and leaving it blocked for an extended period of time when they don't have to.
The Attorney General, Nick Brown, is on our side against Trump. He says Trump's a fascist. So we're emboldened now to riot in the name of hating Orange Man bad. And we wonder why the protest gets out of control here, is because they have leadership, quote unquote leadership, in Washington state and along the whole West Coast is on their side. They're focused more on hating Donald Trump than they are at condemning violent political extremism. That is not the case in the state of Florida. As you know, we do Florida Report on the show every week because there is such a difference between politics in a place like Washington and in a place like Florida. And on this issue, heading into this weekend, where there are even no King's Marches planned in Florida, the messaging from...
Who's planning on going to a No King's March? It's happening tomorrow. I'm not sure what time. I'm not sure what time it's going to happen in my city. Gray Man, 1776 times 2. Thanks for that super chat. Who's planning to go to Washington, D.C. for the military parade for Donald Trump, the military/birthday parade?
Leaders, particularly leaders in law enforcement, could not be more different.
It's not even controversial anymore. People know and
Stuff is just too good. So we just played what cowardly police leadership looks like in the city of Seattle, and it's no wonder we have these massive riots, because essentially these people believe that they have, and they do have, the support of leadership in the city to do it. Now let's see what a real law enforcement leader sounds like. Here's gearing up for potential protests / riots, maybe, I don't know, over the weekend in Florida. Brevard County Sheriff Wayne Ivey, he ain't messing around.
If you let it turn violent, whoo, you do not want to do that in Brevard County. I'm going to tell you that, and I believe I can speak for my fellow sheriffs around the rest of the state. You don't.
Since we've already seen this a couple times, let's see what their reaction is here.
That. But don't you dare break the law, because it won't go well for you.
Graveyard dead. We're going to kill you, graveyard dead. Yeah, you know, I would probably think twice about rioting in Florida after hearing that.
Yeah, I mean, I love how clear and concise they are about things down here, because it does eliminate any excuse of confusion for people on the other end. You know, it's, you know, I've participated in protests, and you can see when things are starting to go a way you don't want to be around. And it's just, if you're the type of person who wants to peacefully protest, you need to know when to leave, so that you don't get caught up in that. And I think that having law enforcement agencies that, and sheriffs and leadership that make it very clear when it goes from peaceful to non-peaceful.
Have you noticed that people on the right are never able to articulate a solid criticism, and they don't even want to go there, a solid criticism against law enforcement? They never have any kind of criticism. They'll push back maybe if they see a Stephen Lara, who's an ex-Marine, who was traveling across country to visit his family, his kids, with $86,000 of his life savings. Then it gets confiscated by the Nevada Highway Patrol. They'll come out, and they see an Institute for Justice win the case. They'll come out against civil asset forfeiture then, but then they conveniently forget about it all the other times, in the hundreds, thousands of incidences that cops enacted legalized armed robbery, which is civil asset forfeiture, against you. Republicans are typically for the drug war because they believe that you are a criminal. You deserve to go into a cage if you have plant matter that God provided. It just doesn't make any sense. Robert with the $2 super chat. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm going to keep this. What's up to Shanta, Natural Born Rights? Thank you guys for being here. Gray Man's here. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to this channel. Hit the bell notification. Make sure you hit this like button right now. I want to keep this live stream under an hour. If it goes more than an hour, people tend to not want to watch it. The takeaway here is that we have a crazy thing going on with this psychological operation propaganda campaign, is getting people who were on the brink of understanding how bad law enforcement is and how tyrannical it's gotten, to now we've got these riots going on. And now people are going, oh, ICE agents, that's perfectly fine. FBI, that's perfectly fine. And they forget about Ruby Ridge. They forget about Waco. They forget about all the atrocities, the ATF putting people in prison for little devices that you can snap onto your gun. So people forget about that kind of stuff. And the crazy thing is people are swayed by the wind. They're like weeds swaying in the wind. When the wind blows this way, they bend over that way, they bend over this way, and they don't have solid in their hearts the message of freedom. People are cheering the chains of their own oppression and their own slavery. Again, nobody wants riots in their town. Nobody wants the cities burning down. Nobody wants hoodlums running around. But we don't want the riot police either. We don't want the Thin Blue Line gang. We don't want SWAT members banging down the door and shooting a Dennis Tuttle or Regina Nicholas and shooting their dog. And that just exponentiates. That's just some examples. You got James Boyd, Philando Castile, Daniel Shaver, Johnny Hurley, who had just saved an entire police department in Arvada, Colorado from a madman who was gunning for cops. Untrained, Johnny Hurley takes him out with his own weapon, and then for his troubles, the Arvada Police Department comes out and shoots him graveyard dead. That's where we're at. You can't, that's inexcusable. People shouldn't just be fired for that. They should be imprisoned, because they would imprison you for the same thing. And rightly so, because if you commit a crime, you don't deserve to walk among us. But they do it as a matter of course every day of their lives. Leave your thoughts about this for the World and the Global Thought Police in the comment section below. Remember, the price of freedom is now and will always be eternal vigilance, and indifference to this notion is the means by which the people have and will secure their own oppression. Stop securing your own oppression and start today